Welcome to this episode of the Fertility Podcast, where I'm going to cut straight to the chase, because if you've heard me before, you'll know that I don't normally sound like this. This episode is a showcase of Fertility Fest. It's coming out late on Monday, the 13th of May. Fertility Fest is drawn to a close. I had to wait before I could share it with you because I lost my voice. I went to a voiceover conference last week and was going to finish off all the intros and basically lost my voice. So what I'm going to attempt to do is talk you through a whole series of clips from the multitude of sessions that happened at Fertility Fest. I want to give you a real taster of the festival from some of the many sessions and panels that were running. There is a lot here. This is a long episode, so make yourself comfortable. I'm really hoping that I can guide you through it, but it's just a taster of what happened, and we recorded a lot of the sessions in full, which are going to be available for you to listen soon.
This is Farrington. The next station is Barbican. This is a Metropolitan line.
Here we are.
I know.
Can you believe it?
No, I can't really. She's going to get into it.
I will.
Yeah. Yeah?
Good. Okay, I'm clear now.
Okay,
Yeah.
Good. Go on. She's smiling. I love it when she smiles.
2019, whole year of activity.
I know.
So,
Barbican,
yeah.
23rd of April to the 18th of May. We're going to ESHRA, which is the biggest fertility industry conference in the world. And then we're also going to the Fertility Show, the largest patient trade fair in the UK.
So we started the festival because we are arts producers, but also we've both had a shared experience of going through IVF. I went through 4 rounds of IVF and now have twins who are 4.
And I went through 11 rounds of IVF unsuccessfully. We always say that that even though the endings of our fertility stories have been different, we share more than that separates us. And we want to bring other people together to explore this really multifaceted and such an important topic for today.
Jessica Hepburn and Gabby Vautier are the curators of the festival, and I've spoken with them before on this podcast, so if you don't know their backgrounds or anything about Fertility Fest and want to know more, please do check out the podcast show notes, because I'll put links to all the episodes.
Oh yeah, we are family. Yeah, I got all my sisters with me. Oh, we are family. Get up everybody and sing. From a place that had no meaning, to the wilderness of time, to the land of new beginnings, starting with a new design. Never doubted for a second that I'd do this on my own. I saw the light and walked towards it, trusting in the things I know. How good it is to love me rather than control me. I don't need the world. I don't need it weighing on my shoulder. It's all over. Here I am now. I made it back from a place called nowhere. I made it back to do this once again. Say, I made it back from a place called nowhere. I made it back. Once again, I made it back. Good evening, Barbican. That's all of you. Look a bit more enthusiastic. I can see you. 1, 2, 3, 4. I made it back from a place called nowhere. I made it back to do this once again. Say, I made it back from a place called nowhere. I made it back.
That was cabaret artist Jamie Anderson, who was performing songs from his new show about becoming a father for the first time as a gay man. And you'll be hearing more from him, so don't you worry. Now, the Queer Family event and panel was made up of a range of conversations, including theatre maker Stella Duffy and playwright Shelley Silas, who have been together for 28 years and have been married 4 times. That's how long it took the law to catch up. They have 18 nieces and nephews, 29 great nieces and nephews, and many godkids and guardkids. They've lost 3 parents, 2 sisters, 1 nephew, and 6 embryos. Now, they didn't have the family they dreamed of, and yet they are family nonetheless. And here they share an improvised reading that the pair of them haven't read to each other before. Then you will hear a reading from Dimple Devadas, who will be telling the remarkable story of her rainbow family, made through the gift of sperm donation from her best-selling Human book.
We have been together for nearly 29 years, right?
Yeah.
And so we were asked to talk about how it is to be our kind of family, which you'll hear as we read, because it's not a show, read you the things we've written. But what's slightly unusual about what we've written is that neither of us have seen what each other's written.
True, it's true.
It's really true.
We have no idea.
No. So we might do crying or laughing, or pissed off, I can't believe you said that.
Hi.
Seriously, we don't know what it is. And there was a moment this afternoon when we came in to do a sound check when we nearly went, oh, bugger it, we'll just read it. Because we know that we've timed it, so we know that we're both about 7 minutes each, but that interaction bit might add a minute. You never know. Anyway, that's what this is. This is us talking about our family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you ready?
Yep.
Ready? Steady.
Ready. Go. Walking hand in hand on the beach at Muriwai in New Zealand, thinking of our babies, making up silly songs and eating kumara chips with mayo.
Knowing the day I met you on the steps of the Banana Cabaret in Balham, yes, here she is.
Dancing for you when you were having chemo. Trying so hard to distract you and make you laugh, and knowing all the time you were in great discomfort and distress.
How much my mum loved you, and even though you never met my dad, you do a pretty good impression of him anyway. And the huge admiration I have for you for all the caring work you do for your mother.
Our godson telling his mum that he was so glad Stella married Shelley because he gets to have 2 godmothers.
You dancing while I was having chemo to take my mind off the drugs going into me.
In my lifetime, I know I've given my Indian parents quite a few shocks. 3 moments in particular spring to mind. But before I take you on that journey, each time my intention wasn't to hurt or shock, but to share the truth and be each other's rocks. To create a space to stand with pride, include them in my queer ride, grounded in my authenticity, and embrace my queer without judgment, shame, or fear. So let me take you on this journey. The first shock I delivered was when I revealed to my parents that I was considering a psychology degree instead of medicine. That's perfectly okay, Dimple, to do a psychology degree. Oh, really? Really, Mum? After you've done medicine? Wow. The second shock was delivered when I revealed to my mum and dad, Mum, Dad, this arranged marriage business with an Indian man, it just isn't for me. But they're such good boys and they're doctors. No, it's not for me. Really? Have you found yourself a good boyfriend yourself? No, Mum. I found myself a girlfriend. I love her very much, and I don't care about the Indian community. It's me. Shock number 3. It's the year 2012, the backdrop of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee and the London 2012 Olympics. I decide to share the news with my parents. Mum, Dad, guess what? Planning to have a baby with some donor sperm. The shock was mine, because in that one moment, nothing else mattered. My choice of career, the Asian community, she was just happy. About time, Dimple. At last. So picture this. My Indian Hindu traditional family. We're all huddled on my sister's sofa in a 3-bed mid-terrace in Essex. we've got to have some vegetable samosas with mango chutney and raita. We're huddled around my MacBook, shopping for sperm. Wow! Would I have pictured this? No, not in a million years.
We're now going to move from the performance to the questions, as one of the points of Fertility Fest is to give you access to a range of conversations about every stage you might be at. You'll hear now from the TTC session chaired by Anya Sizer, and the panel consisted of Professor Geeta Nargund, leading women's health expert Emma Cannon. They were talking about unexplained infertility. Emma shares the conversations she has from patients asking why they were offered add-ons. And you'll also hear from Tamsin Jeffs from MyLotus Fertility Monitor, as well as fertility expert from ITV This Morning, Dr. Larisa Corda. They're all giving their advice on what was one thing they would say to anyone listening and still trying to conceive.
Hi, I've got unexplained infertility. I've had 2 failed IVF cycles with 6 failed embryo transfers. With unexplained infertility, there's no answers, you can't get any answers, and that's the biggest thing for me. You've got nothing to hold on to, you've got no problem to fix. Yeah. And I was just looking for advice of how you cope with that and how you can deal with that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very common question, and I agree. I think that phrase unexplained, already that's a really tough starting point. So any thoughts maybe from a medical perspective?
Well, unexplained infertility, the cause is not explained by us in a way. We haven't diagnosed it. Doesn't mean there isn't one. Okay, so in some ways, as far as unexplained infertility is concerned, if I could just go off track a little bit and say that a lot of women with unexplained infertility tend to try, let me try some Clomid or try some insemination, all that. There's no benefit of trying all these. Okay, it's best to try naturally. DIY can do better than IUI or any other forms of treatment when you don't need treatment. But in your case, I don't know the details, your age, exactly why the embryo transfers have failed, because sometimes we can work out a little bit whether it is embryonic or whether it is to do with your uterus and your own reproductive function. So there are some things we can tease out to find out a little bit more. For example, the blood flow to the womb can affect your chances of conceiving or implantation. There are so many things: thyroid function, prolactin level, peripheral things in our health as well. It's very difficult for me to answer that without knowing your full medical details, but I'm quite happy to talk to you offline after the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Emma, is it something that you're seeing?
Yeah, well, I see a lot of it, because obviously when there's no medical reason, people reach out for that. And part of what I do in the initial consultation is sort of trying to look in at every aspect to see, I feel like my job is trying to go in and look in the places where maybe other people haven't looked. Obviously I'm not always successful in that, but have you had the DNA tested in the sperm? Yeah. Yeah, because I wanted to raise that about DNA fragmentation, because often that's overlooked, and it's a really difficult area because
do you want to just quickly explain?
Yeah, explain. So sometimes the DNA can be fragmented in men's sperm and it's not picked up under normal semen analysis. And it's difficult what's happening at the moment because IVF clinics are very criticised if they offer too many tests up front. There's the whole argument about add-ons. But I sit in between the clinics and the patients, and I get patients who get very irate as well that they're not offered all of these tests up front. The press and the media would like everything to be really simple, that everything is black and white, there's goodies and there's baddies. Life isn't that simple. I genuinely think that most clinics will offer you things as appropriate when they can. They clearly can't offer you every test at the beginning. So I'm often the person in the middle soothing things over, saying I'm sure that they, meant well by not offering you that day one, but it wasn't appropriate. So as Geeta said, it's very difficult for me to make any comment because this is going to be such an individual thing. But just keep faith.
What thing would you want to say most to someone who is trying to conceive today?
Don't give up. I think it's most important. I was 6 years before I had IVF, and most importantly, keep going. It is worth it in the end, whichever route you take, whether it's conceiving naturally, IVF, on donation, surrogacy. You know, it's a long journey, but don't give up.
Brilliant. So don't give up.
No.
Fantastic. Thank you. Emma?
A similar sort of idea, but I see more and more in clinic that the struggles that you go through and everything that you go through in order to be a parent, they're really raising the vibration, really, of the planet, and actually the children that are being born to couples that struggle or individuals that struggle, they learn so many resources along the way. And all of those skills, kindness, compassion, patience, perseverance, all those deep resources and resilience that you learn, that hopefully you'll pass on to your children one day. And goodness only knows the planet needs it. So I often say, instead of thinking that you're struggling to conceive, maybe reframe that you're evolving to conceive.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Wonderful.
Well,
Geeta?
if you're trying to conceive, the first thing I would say is find out about your own fertility status. I mean, we need to work on this with our National Health Service a lot more, because at the moment we do not have a fertility screening or fertility MOT available in the National Health Service. Unless you have had infertility of a year's duration or 2 years' duration, you don't even get to a secondary care consultant and get help. And also find out about what affects your fertility, both male and female, and hopefully we'll talk about men as well here, because more than 50% of fertility problems are due to sperm problems now. So both have to work on it, find out about your fertility, and find out about what affects your fertility, and try and do your very best to optimize your natural fertility before you actually embark on fertility treatment. And hopefully we'll try and talk about some nice guidelines and what is available in primary, secondary care, because don't forget, we are there in the National Health Service to help you as well.
Yes, thank you. And I will come back to that, actually. We want to obviously look at the emotional side of things and the holistic impact, but I think it starts from the medical and the guidelines, so that's a really important thing. We'll come back to that. What would you want to say?
Well, I'd echo what my fellow panel has said, but in addition to that, I share the same motto that IVF Babble does, which is find your tribe and find people who support you and who love and appreciate who you are and what you bring to this. And there's so much information out there now, and there's so much advice out there now as well for people to access, which is getting better and better. And I think realise you're not alone. That's the most important thing to me, that you really aren't. And infertility is such a common problem. 1 in 7 couples suffers from this. So just, be brave enough to try and access some of the services that are out there and find people who can help you in all sorts of ways. Even before, you try for, I think quite often we see when people come to us in clinic, they've been trying for a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years, sometimes even longer, and just realise that help is out there sooner than you think.
Anya asked a question about the impact of the fertility struggle on men and whether there were any men in the audience willing to talk. Now, I was pleased to see more men in the audience at this Fertility Fest than I've seen before. However, as you will hear, the conversation highlighted the issue around how men are treated by clinics, as well as how all too often men are sadly reluctant to speak up.
Okay, one more question. Just wonder as well if any of the men are brave enough to share a little bit, because I think that is an area that's so often overlooked when we talk about trying to conceive, that actually just because the woman tends to be doing maybe more of the injections, etc., it doesn't mean emotionally that the men aren't facing emotionally just as big an issue. So I just wonder if there is a brave guy that had any questions, but if not, don't worry. Male perspective, maybe just a short sentence about how best to support men going through this.
I think after my own IVF cycles, I set up a free support service, and it was something that I got my husband involved in very quickly, and it came as a huge shock to me to hear him talk to other men about how he felt outside of the situation, how he felt that maybe it was his fault even though there wasn't anything medically wrong with him, but that he couldn't give me a child. So I think it's really important that men are brought into the situation more. And in consultations, it's not just consultation to the woman, it's a consultation to the couple, because I think men do feel left out, certainly.
Absolutely.
I would agree. I think that men are the neglected part of infertility, and I think a lot of them suffer in silence. And it's been brought to my attention increasingly that actually there's an enormous burden of suffering that goes on their end, because quite often men are made to feel as if they have to be the macho, strong ones, carrying everything forward and putting this very brave face on. And unlike women, I don't think there's necessarily the right support, which is why we also see a lot of depression exist in the male community, and also suicide as well, because it's, you know, this stiff upper lip, and culturally we really educate our men and boys to kind of go through life like that. But of course, it's really important, again, to recognise that there's an enormous amount of stress associated with that, and with, you know, carrying the burden of unsuccessful treatment or failure to get pregnant, and trying to really talk about it. So finding methods and resources that you can access, which there are more and more, as I keep saying, there really, really are. And I think there's a lot of women in the Instagram community that I see who talk with one another, and I think we need to set something up like that for the men.
There is. I will have to wrap things up, but just to say there is a fantastic closed online Facebook group for men specifically. I always go on about it. Run by a wonderful man called Gareth Down, who went through male factor infertility. And the group now is very big, several hundred people, and it's a great safe place for men to go to.
Now, I'll make sure there's a link to Gareth's Facebook group that was mentioned in the show notes for this episode, as well as a link to the previous podcast episode I did with him, sharing his story and the reason he set up the male-only Facebook group. This seems a good point now to bring in Ellis Matthews, who was part of the Invisible Man session. And then you'll hear from Foz Foster, who was part of the miscarriage evening, talking about his feelings of how he was treated whilst dealing with the miscarriages of his children.
0. That was the word that stuck out and stung my ears like a wasp buzzing across the doctor's consulting room. 0. You have 0 sperm. Come again? How many? 0? None? Not any? It's a funny word, that, 0, and in the context of sperm, where you might expect a few million, or at least hundreds and thousands of swimmers sprinkled in the samples I deposited in the closeted hospital offices, which in some provinces get called a masturbatorium. Now, that's a true story, but back to that room and that wasp and that 0. And to say I'm surprised that you've analysed my supplies and couldn't find any little guys, nothing but 0, well, that semen analysis leaves me in paralysis, and I just sit there in gobsmacked awe, eyes glazed over, gaping jaw, which just about closes as you repeat the diagnosis. You have 0 sperm. And to give her due, the GP does, as GPs often fail to do, put it in layman's terms. 0 sperms. At least it's clear. Whoa, did she really just say 0? It's a funny number, 0. Absolute, final, clinical, cold. Somehow less than nothing. Zip, zilch, 0. And although it's just a number on a page, it hits me like a judgment, like a wave, pointing its finger right at me, as if this infertility, which is mine, which belongs to me, is an indictment of my masculinity, and so it cuts the core of my identity, because as it happens, I've always had no sperm in me. 0. Nada. Just like Lady Gaga used to say, baby, I was born this way.
To the visually unaware, I'm a man. I'm the proud dad of 2 beautiful, healthy children, a boy who is now 18 and a girl who's 14, going on 21. She's perfect, well, until they were teenagers. My wife wanted to have more children from about 38-ish, but I wasn't keen. However, I came around to the idea at about 40. My wife was always more aware of the practicalities and complexities of pregnancy, the idea of a cycle, ovulation, when was the right time to try. I wasn't. Why would I? 2 successful pregnancies, everything in good working order. Of course it will be fine. We conceived straight away, and after 8 weeks, we went to have a scan. Told there was no heartbeat, no growth, no baby, no parenthood, no future. Go home, have a miscarriage. This was in 2010 and 2011. We then had 2 further miscarriages all within a year. 3 miscarriages within 1 year. We were both aged 42. This work was also partially inspired by how angry and frustrated I was by friends and family asking, "How's your wife?" This is not about a competition for attention, but an awareness that it takes 2 people to make a baby and 2 people go through the loss.
There were numerous book readings throughout Fertility Fest, and you can find out all about the authors who are sharing their work via the show notes, as well as on the Fertility Fest website. And next is a wonderful reading from Julia Bueno, who has a new book out called The Brink of Being, which has just been published.
As I know so well, miscarriages often give permission for the telling of other miscarriage stories. Like many women having children 30 years ago, Lucy's mother hadn't talked about what had happened to her with friends or family, nor shared her feelings of grief with anyone apart from her husband. The pressure her mother felt back then to put up and shut up was more intense than what she perceived to be the case for women today, and Lucy was left with no conscious inkling of her sibling-to-be. However, witnessing her and supporting her daughter's experiences reawakened the memories of this past loss. And Lucy came to learn the story of another family bereavement that, like her own, would never quite find its bearings. Lucy had never known that for most years, while she was growing up, her mother had privately remembered both the date of her miscarriage and the date she'd hoped to give birth to a sibling for Lucy. Neither had her younger sister, born a year after this due date, but in more recent years, emboldened by pregnancy loss awareness campaigns, Lucy's mother had bought flowers for the kitchen table to mark her lost due date, but only ever told Lucy's father why. Lucy told me how much she appreciated her mother's candour, as she did other women's too, and how the shared grief supported her. She vowed to talk more to her mother about her experience, not wanting the topic to disappear again.
So we've got 3 big aims.
Yeah, so number 1 is that we want to improve understanding of the emotional experience of people who struggle to conceive or go on a complex journey to conceive, so that we can improve mental health care and support for patients.
We're working really closely with our clinics, who are supporters. They've been amazing, and they're really changing their practice, aren't they? We've seen that over 3 years. They've started to really do things that are making a difference in terms of that emotional care.
And number 2, we really want to improve fertility education. We think that young people need to know more than how not to get pregnant, and so that they have the best chance of creating the families they want in the future. And number 3 is that we just want to raise all levels of public discourse about reproductive science.
Which again, I think we're doing.
Absolutely. What it can do, what it can't do, and how it's changing the way the human race is being made.
That was Jessica and Gabby talking in the main video for Fertility Fest about their 3 main aims for the festival, which they definitely have achieved. You're going to hear from Dr. David Ogutu, explaining how watching the work has helped him see more of the patient's point of view, and also from the Big Fertility Questions event, where Hannah Vaughan-Jones chaired a brilliant panel. One of the focuses was the issue of support for patients, and Professor Geeta Nargund, Ricky Martin, Joyce Harper and Jeffrey True, and Hannah's husband Lewis Vaughan-Jones were all talking about the availability of counselling.
It's events like these make us also learn and see that other side that we don't see. We look at the clinical side, but this was all very powerful for me, and my clinical practice is going to change a lot from this.
How will your clinical practice change from this?
I'm just thinking about not dealing with the end of the miscarriage like topic, but this couple are going to go home. They're going to have to live with this for the rest of their lives, because sometimes they come back to us and they have a successful pregnancy, and we forget about the fact that they had a miscarriage, first or second or third, and that will stay with them no matter what the eventual outcome is, whether they have successful deliveries in the future. That miscarriages would stay with them, and just having that at the back of our mind, but also the men as well. With men, we try to be strong for our wives and try and support them through it, but deep down we've got to at least maybe call the gentleman after a couple of weeks, or just find out how he's doing, because the phone call is usually to the lady, courtesy call to the lady, how is she coping after the miscarriage. But it's got to think about calling the men as well.
Well, I'm glad to see Fertility Fest is once again changing practice and improving it for people. Well done, Jessica.
Would you accept that up to this point, emotional support, be it counselling or be it just that sort of emotional support from the nurses in a clinic, has been lacking?
Oh, totally. I'll tell you one thing, that not only, in the National Health Service is lacking really so much, because It's not only the funding, it's even counselling facilities in the NHS for infertility are lacking terribly. And in fact, it's only recently we have even achieved a situation where infertility patients are not sitting next to antenatal patients who are attending to for their pregnancy care. That was a big battle in the NHS to separate the waiting area. So there is definitely a need to increase emotional support. Public sector has got to improve massively, and the private sector clearly is improving, but still not there.
Yeah. I'd add to that to say that I think anyone who's, I guess there's a lot of people in the room who might either be on a journey or have been on one, and there's some help here, but I actually think we have to take responsibility as patients ourselves for that, because we went through multiple rounds, we had multiple failures. We didn't get asked once for counselling through any clinic, through any NHS. We didn't get asked once. Time and time again, it was a sausage factory for the next thing. So what I'd say is, don't undervalue the mental side of the support you'll need, because it was the loneliest place in the world on the journey, and I still feel, as you said, you feel trauma. I still feel that now. It was lonely between me and my partner, me and my family, me and my friends, me and my business. Don't undervalue that, and I'd say take a responsibility for actually seeking that mental support. Don't feel shy between your partner that you need that independently, because we weren't asked once, and yes, we're saying we need to have that support, but no proper clinic gave us the option, and I think that could have helped, because our relationship almost broke and then it came back together, and that would have helped the journey.
I think for us it was very much the first round that we did was on the NHS, and we didn't really have any option of counselling or anything then, and I suppose it was once we went into the private sector that then it was on offer, but you're sort of, you're paying for it then, and I'm a big proponent of the NHS, I think it's brilliant, but it was interesting to me the fact that it was much more readily available in the private sector than in the public.
I think though it's the whole pathway, although sometimes when the HFA look at it, it's counselling for IVF. Yeah. It's actually counselling before, during and after. But whether you're successful and still traumatised, or have an ectopic, or a miscarriage, you still need counselling. So I think it is the full pathway, whether it works or doesn't work, whatever the outcome of that pregnancy is, there should be suitable facilities available. And advising the patient of the consequences, the sequelae of what they've gone through. Not waiting for the patient to have further problems and then try and dig themselves out of a deeper hole. So I think it's the whole pathway, not just the IVF part.
And I just think how many people won't even realise that that have been successful. And I have families. My youngest is 13, and it's only through the work, partly the work with Jessica and Gabby, that I've been listening to all these stories and conversations and realising that I am still traumatised. So how many people don't realise that they're traumatised? And it's taken me 13 years, and I work in the field. So I am absolutely going to have some trauma counselling. Several people have said to me, they think I need it, because they can see. I cry. Jessica and I cry all the time. No, seriously. I'm being really honest. I think there is something that I need to get out, and it's only because I'm in the right situation. So how many of there's we're about 7 million IVF children in the world, and how many of those have had post-treatment counselling?
Yeah, that's the children, let alone the parents. And Ricky, you feel quite strongly about the trauma side of it. I guess that classifies it as a disease in itself.
I think disease is an interesting word from my side, because typically classifying it as a disease might support the funding and bring it up in terms of the priority of the nation. But if someone said to me when we're going through fertility, Ricky, you've got a disease, I might actually go into my shell a bit and become less open about talking to people and trying to spread the word and talk about it. So there's a bit of a double-edged sword, I think, with the term disease. I think scientifically in the application to support funding, absolutely we classify it. But if we're trying to get people to talk about it, share stories, I mean, I just think of a simple example. When we were going through the journey, and we get asked 100 times by, particularly my partner's side, when you're having kids, when are we having grandkids? And we're like, do you know what? Should we stop talking about this because we're actually having problems? At that point, all of a sudden, my mother-in-law, my gran-in-law, all of a sudden they opened up to, actually, we had problems when we went through it. I'm like, so you've been pressurising us for years, but not talking to us? So I think, again, if it was a disease, I probably wouldn't have had that conversation. So I'm sitting on the fence with my answer to your question, but to help us all get funding, it's there.
I'm going to come back to Geeta. I want to go straight to Lewis, because I think you'd probably agree.
I just think it's one of these ridiculous stigmas. I mean, I'm not going to get into the disease debate, that's beyond my knowledge, but it feels like a ridiculous stigma to me. It's completely unnecessary. There doesn't seem to be any need for it. It's kind of embarrassing that it's still an issue in 2019. And yeah, the answer, I don't know, just keep on talking about it and keep on talking about it.
We're going to pick up again now with Lewis Vaughan-Jones talking about the cost of treatment.
I just want to come in on the cost thing, because I think it's quite a familiar pattern with, male-female couples going in. I, for a number of years probably, became absolutely fixated with the cost. And it's partly because you're going through this process and everything is happening to Hannah, all the drugs, all the up and down, everything. And there's kind of a limit to what I can do and emotionally do. So naturally, you tend to focus in on the things that you can, and that was the cost. And the tens of thousands of pounds going out, it became everything for a while. I was so resentful. I was resentful when I was speaking to doctors, when we were switching clinics. I was resentful of absolutely every element of going in for all our procedures and everything. And it got to a point when I had to just let it go, which I dealt with it by writing it all down, which kind of seems counterproductive because then you
have the largest spreadsheet you could imagine.
Yeah, the largest, geekiest spreadsheet, and that totally floored me. I couldn't believe this is how much it was costing me. But actually getting it out, writing it down, and it was gone. And like I say, over the last couple of years, I've kind of dealt with it. But lots of men who I've spoken to about IVF, they've gone through a similar thing. They end up fixating on this because they can't take the drugs ourselves or go through the pain ourselves.
I'm really hoping you're still with me, despite how I sound, as I've been trying to take you on this Fertility Fest journey, giving you tasters of the conversations and hopefully showing you how much we were talking about. And there is still so much to say. So far you've heard about many different stories when it comes to trying to conceive, and we still need to address what it feels like growing up already knowing that you're going to struggle. The Young, Gifted and Infertile night was one of Jessica's highlights, she said near the end of the festival. The evening started with a performance of Flushed, written and directed by Catherine Cranfield. Then Natasha Bishop, student and founder of the Pants Project, spoke about how underwear became her tool for empowerment when she was diagnosed aged 16 with Mayer-Rokitansky-Kuster-Hauser syndrome, otherwise known as MRKH. Also, Andrea Trigo, founder of Infertile Life, and Marie Garville, co-chair of the Daisy Network, make up the panel and were all interviewed by Jessica. And I'm jumping in at a point where Jessica and the panel talked to Catherine about her play.
Yeah, Kate, actually, I'm about to come to the audience, but one more question, because one of the things that really struck me about your play is when Marnie describes these things that she's not going to get. And I thought, as someone who's experienced infertility myself, I really felt, gosh, that is so true. Those are all the things that run through your head when you're told that you might not be able to conceive. But you've not been in that situation. So how did you reach that place?
I think, that particular speech is quite personal because it's got a lot of stuff that my mum and dad have basically. It's quite, it's a couple of it is true, like when she's carrying to the window. That was my dad who did that when I was in hospital. And my mum used to say, they're here, so I'm not going to look in the audience because I'll cry. But my mum always used to say, whenever she says I've grown or something, which, let's not, I'm 5'3", so not that much, but the arm, hand, that's them. So I think growing up with stories like that, I don't know, for me it's something I've always, that's what I want. So I know that I don't know, and I haven't been diagnosed, and I don't have it, but I empathise as a woman with that wanting to have a child. Mm-hmm. And so for me it was just about opening that conversation and offering support to those who were going through the loss.
Did you ever do any research? I'm just so blown away by how incredibly accurate it was. It really was like watching my own brain on stage. So it amazes me that you didn't everyone's nodding along. It's so accurate. It's just can we please put it on the National Theatre? That'd be nice. No,
I did. I did a lot of research, especially with Daisy, and I ended up speaking to on the phone or going to meet many amazing women who shared their story with me. So it was vital that for me, that because obviously it's not something that I've gone through, it was essential to me that I went and met with those women. I was in Manchester at the time when I was writing it, and actually 2 of them ended up being in Manchester, so I went for coffees, and that was really important to me.
That session will be available, as I want to continue to look at the other routes to parenthood if having a baby how you expected becomes more and more unlikely. So we're going to look at some of the other routes. And here's Claire Taylor with a snippet of her brilliant piece on going into solo motherhood, followed by Paula Varjak sharing a piece from The Baby Question, a new play in development that fuses personal stories and pop culture to amplify the narratives of the childless or child-free or child-full women, which was such a spectacle. And if you get the chance, do go and see it.
No, I'm not getting married. No, I'm not emigrating. No, I haven't got another cat. No, I'm going to try to have a child using donor sperm. My mother is over the moon. Oh, the phone line can hardly bear her smile. Oh, you should have done this years ago. And at the clinic, you never know, you might meet someone. And she misses the point by a mile. Hello. Look, I know we haven't known each other very long, but I kind of feel there's something between you and me, and yeah, okay. So, I need to tell you something. No, I'm not married. No, I'm not emigrating. No, I'm not planning to kill you. No, I'm about to start trying to have a child using donor sperm. He's confused. And then he's over the moon! I'd love more children, especially with you. Not now, in 5 or 6 years. And the point sails into the blue. But it doesn't really matter what other people think. This is a chance. I'm no longer stuck in that terrible limbo of not even being able to try. And if and when and if this works, then the fact I was inseminated by a nurse who I had not even dated will all be by the by.
The woman without children. The woman without children never wanted children, even though she loves to play with them. The woman without children has been trying for a child for over a year. The woman without children decided she was going to stop trying after the 3rd miscarriage. The woman without children isn't a survivor of ovarian cancer. The woman without children has had 3 rounds of IVF, and she can't take it anymore. The woman without children has had 4 rounds of IVF, and she can't afford it. The woman without children sometimes thinks about that abortion. The woman without children is now 35, and is the only one of her friends who don't have kids. The woman without children is brought up having children in 4 of her previous relationships. The woman without children is friends with all of her ex-girlfriends and their wives. The woman without children saw a man who was desperately very sure that he never wanted children until he left her for another woman, and then suddenly he did. The woman who without children doesn't want to raise a child alone. She doesn't know who she could raise one with. The woman without children feels like she's being left behind by her friends. The woman without children is running out of time. The woman without children. The woman without children. The woman without children. The woman without children.
There was also a UK premiere from Russian-born and American-based film director Irina Vodar of her film Anything You Lose. An extraordinary story spanning 7 years. It focuses on the director's personal journey through assisted reproduction, resulting in an eye-opening study of the psychological effects of prolonged exposure to treatment and the innate human need to connect through time and generations. It was followed by an in-depth discussion with Chair of the HFEA Sally Cheshire, Irina herself, and Debbie Evans from Herts and Essex Fertility Clinic. It was chaired by Zeynep Gurtin, lecturer in women's health at UCL, and you're going to hear a little bit of it here.
Hi everybody, it's a pleasure to see you here today, and I am so thrilled to be able to share my work with you. It's a result of, well, I have to say it's been 10 years. It's been 5 years of reproductive technologies and 5 years of processing what I have experienced. So I am really thrilled to share it with you tonight. I think you're the best audience that can have the first screening. So I hope you enjoy the film, and we will meet after the movie. Thank you.
Wow. So thank you so much to Irina for the premiere of that incredibly raw powerful film. And we've now got just about 20-25 minutes to have a bit of a Q&A. We're very fortunate to have also Sally Cheshire here on the panel, who is the chair of the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, which regulates fertility treatments here in the UK, and also Debbie Evans, who is Director of Clinical Services at Herts and Essex, and she's a nurse, so she's sort of part of a clinical team that would help look after patients. But yeah, Irina Vodar, who we've all had an introduction to, Russian-born filmmaker, currently living in New York. And thank you so much, Irina. I mean, that was, just to start off, that was a difficult film to watch. And I just want to bring in Sally here and just also maybe pick up on the fact that as the regulator, as the HFEA, and there were certain aspects of practice in that film which would not happen in the UK in terms of transfer of large numbers of embryos and things like that. And maybe you can reflect on that a little bit with your professional hat on.
Certainly. So I just want to pay tribute to Irina for such an honest and a brave film.
Thank you very much.
I am the chair of the HFEA, but many people will know that we also spent 10 years on an infertility journey, ultimately unsuccessful. And I've tried in my time as the chair to make sure we focus on patient support. There are great clinics like Debbie's who pride themselves on their feedback from patients, and they are providing an awful lot from one particular clinic at the moment, so all credit to you as well. I think that roller coaster journey is something you never really get away from. And what we're doing is focusing a lot more on patient support. So it's now mandatory to have a patient support policy, as we touched on in one of the sessions this morning, and to be able to explain to us what patient-centred care means. How are you going to look after a patient and her partner, or a single woman? And what does that mean for all of your staff? Not just the counsellor traditionally, but when you meet nurses or when you have all of your staff, even someone on the front desk who is really welcoming to you when you walk into a clinic, which makes a massive difference. And we will be rolling out our inspection against that patient support policy over the coming months. I think you're right, there is a level of transparency in the UK, but we're not perfect. We're probably quite different to the US in that sense. I think there's always a fine balance that Debbie touched on between being positive for your patients and supporting them in something that you are hopeful about versus giving patients the real statistics and a realistic chance of what your success might be. And I have to say there was probably only Dr. Moritz in your film, wasn't there, who was actually really honest with you about both not just fertility but gynecology more generally and what your chances were. And I spoke last weekend in the press, quite widely covered, about how we really need to be honest with patients about what their realistic chances of success are. So if you are over 40, actually it's less than 10%. And by the time you're 44, if you're using your own eggs, it's about 1%. And I think we need to find the right balance, and patients are different, between being transparent, and not all our clinics are there yet, and also finding positive support, whatever the outcome of your journey is. There were a number of things that alarmed me about transferring the number of embryos. Debbie's smiling as well, but we just wouldn't do that in the UK. We've actually worked over probably the last 10 years to try and be really clear that the birth of a single healthy baby is the thing. And actually putting back lots and lots of embryos doesn't improve your success rate. And I know you've had a really difficult experience with that.
Yeah, and you know, you're bringing up a very important point here, because when you're on the sexual journey, when you start, and I praise myself for being an sensible enough person, you know, if I need to research some stuff, I can actually open a book and read it. But the thing is that the combination of hormones that you're taking, an incredible emotional duress that you're going through, and pressure, you know, to perform and so on and so forth, it just makes it very, very difficult to be able to research information on your own. So what happens, you kick into this automated response type of thing, and you want to come to your doctor, you want to trust your doctor, and this is the time when you truly need it. and you want to say, okay, this is what you recommend, this is what I'm going to do. And as the result, you see what happens on the screen. You just go with whatever is being advised, and then, let the cards fall where they may. And then you're left for, years to process what had happened in that short period of time.
We're going to go back to being left to process trauma. And during the Modern Families panel, which I was chairing, Lisa Faulkner and Izzy Judd both gave readings of their books, and the expert panel was formed of James Nikopoulos from the Lister Clinic and David Ogutu from Hearts and Essex. Lisa starts the conversation talking about her experience of having an ectopic pregnancy, and I think you'll be quite surprised at how she was spoken to.
You both suffered miscarriages, and with James explaining something like that, did you feel that it was explained like that to you at the time? Because we're obviously talking more about miscarriage. There was an event here at the start of the week. It's not something that I had been through, but I've spoken to a lot of women that have been through it, and that explanation that something wasn't right, I don't think is made so obvious, and therefore you're then left to beat yourself up and internalise it all. How did you guys feel?
I had an ectopic, and nobody... I had found out I was pregnant. This was completely naturally before I started on the IVF. And it was the best day of my life to find out I was pregnant. And then a few weeks later, I had this ectopic and I was at work. And I didn't know what was wrong. I just collapsed on set and was taken to the hospital. And everyone kept banding this word around, this ectopic. It's an ectopic pregnancy. And because they said ectopic pregnancy, I thought I was still pregnant. And I couldn't work out, and they were saying, no, it's just that it's growing in the wrong place. And I was, well, if it's growing in the wrong place, can you just put it back in the right place? And because they kept saying ectopic pregnancy, I thought I was pregnant the whole time, and it really, I couldn't understand that I wasn't going to have that baby, that it wasn't going to be okay. And the surgeon was the doctor was so, he was just said, he came in and he said, we've got to take you to surgery because otherwise you're going to, it's going to burst or something awful was going to happen. And I said, does that mean that I'm not going to be pregnant when I wake up? And he said, yes, of course. No, oh, okay. So he said, stop eating or something like that. And I remember thinking he was so cold and so like, you're young, it's fine. And it didn't matter that it had only been a few weeks. To me, in those few weeks, I had imagined my whole life. And I think that's what everyone sort of forgets, is that your life in front of you, and the minute you find out you're pregnant, is so exciting. And so when it doesn't happen, you're the first person that you're going to beat up, not anybody else. And I think it's very comforting to hear that actually your body's going, it's in the wrong place or it wasn't right. And hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
It's such a simple bit of information to pass on that isn't.
Yeah. It's not always the case, but the vast majority, that's the reason. But it's like anything, if something goes wrong in our lives, we beat ourselves up. It's whichever part of the life it is, and it's important that we try and minimise that.
Just the awareness that, unfortunately, as a species, we're very inefficient at reproduction. The chances of getting the right egg and sperm to create a normal embryo to implant, even for couples who don't have fertility problems, it may take 2-3 months. But it means that they actually are getting fertilization and an embryo is getting created. But if it's not normal, the womb does not allow it to implant, and it may take several goes before they do conceive. But even with an IVF cycle, we always tell the patients that, we go through this journey with 100 couples, half may get pregnant with the first go or the first frozen embryo, but the other half may not be pregnant. But it's a marathon, not a sprint, so it may take several goes. At the end, if they're able to have the funding either through the NHS or the means to have at least 3 to 4 goes, the vast majority would have conceived. But unfortunately, there's some may not have conceived, and having the education and awareness that there's other options as well. There is, if it doesn't work naturally or through fertility treatment, it's the end of your chances of being a mother. There is options of adoption, surrogacy, donor eggs. So having that information and imparting it in the right time, and also having a plan of this is plan A, and clomid ovulation induction. If it doesn't work, this plan B, plan C, and just managing those expectations makes a big difference to the very painful and difficult journey for some, unfortunately.
Right, we're nearly at an hour, and I'm aware that I'm going to have to let you go soon, and there's still so much for you to hear. But next you're going to hear Louise McLaughlin explaining how she feels being a child of donor conception. Now, I must say there is a baby in the audience, which you may hear from time to time, so I do apologise if that could be a trigger for you. Fertility Fest wanted to be as inclusive to everybody. Louise is introducing the panel discussions after the audience have seen a few scenes from writer Louise Parry and director Zoe Waterman's play called 2023, which looks at what might happen when the first batch of donor-conceived children turn 18 and can legally have access to their donor records following the introduction of the UK's non-anonymity laws introduced in 2005.
So I was conceived in London in 1990. I was conceived before the law changed in 2005, obviously, so I have no details on my donor at all. I can't even get them if I want them. They were all destroyed, basically. So, yeah, I'm one of the last wave of donor-conceived people who's not able to track down the biological donor, whether that's sperm or egg. So if I get a hit on a DNA site, that's basically the only way that I'm going to be able to track down my biological father. But I also have no idea how many siblings I have. I know that when my parents used this donor, they were told that he was good. So presumably he'd been quite successful before I came about. But yeah, no idea. It could be upwards of, it could be dozens. But I am lucky enough to have found one of them, who you see there. So I found my half-sister. I'm going to refer to her as my sister from now on because that's the way I kind of view her. I found her a year and a half ago. We got a hit on ancestry.co.uk. So I wrote an article about it. When I was growing up, the whole thing was very secretive. It was shrouded in silence. I was told not to tell any of the relatives, any family friends. Obviously, there's a lot of shame around infertility, and for my dad, I think he carried that. And my mum kind of pushed that on me as well. She made it clear that we weren't to really talk about it, to draw attention to it. And I feel that donor-conceived people, sometimes we have to carry the weight of other people's emotions. I felt growing up that I was really carrying the weight of the fact that he didn't want to come face-to-face with his own infertility, and that was difficult for me. But yes, anyway, without further ado, I'm going to play you a video of the night that I found my sister. My flatmate at the time was smart enough to grab his phone and record it. So yes, this is when basically she reached out via Ancestry. And at first we thought we were cousins, but she said the word sister and I latched onto it. The thought, I grew up as an only child, the thought of having a sister is a dream come true. So this is me before we knew what was happening, but it's me when I'm really, really hoping that she's going to be my sister. It's a lot of swearing, by the way, apologies.
I'm really sorry to leave you hanging there. But as you will have gathered, there's varying levels of quality from the audio that you've been hearing, as some people use mics and some people didn't. And that clip from Louise that she talks about the phone call couldn't really be heard. But there's lots that can be, and I will be giving you details of how you can hear more at the end of this episode. OK, we need to talk more about egg freezing. So I'm going to let you hear from Anya Sizer and a clip from her theatre company, The Brewmakers show, which is called The Egg Rumour. It's a musical comedy with an important question at its heart. What is the truth about this new work perk that many young women are being offered to freeze their eggs and put baby making on hold whilst they pursue their careers? Is it a perk?
I can tell you what they do. You mean the Yanks? Oh, the little trick up their sleeve. They call it egg freezing. What did you just say? Egg freezing. A new contract, more hours, no maternity leave. Means you can have the women for as long as you need. Means I can get the women for as long as I need. And what is egg freezing? Well, they design a new policy, help choose work and family. They need a man of their dreams. They haven't got time, or so it seems. Egg freezing. I can get the, you can get the, we can get the. I can get the women for as long as I need. It was 2 years ago when I was sat at my desk, headphones on, eyes glued to my screen, waiting for my next call. I worked in a call centre, and in between calls I would check out the news, see what was going on, and we only had the Guardian or the Daily Mail, so we were quite limited. And this one day I was reading and I saw a tiny little blue screen with a circle in it saying, new work perk. And so I click on it, and it was egg freezing, the new perk. And I thought, well, what is egg freezing, and why is that a perk? And I was so interested yet bewildered that I knew nothing and had heard nothing about this before. I had no idea what egg freezing was, and I was quite hooked. I got no commission that day because I was too interested, and I thought, who wanted to sell wine anyway? So I used my work perk, and I printed off every article I could find. I read articles from America, from doctors, business, women, and men. I later then rang my mum saying, Mum, have you heard about this? It's egg freezing. You know, it's a new perk for women. But something in me simply didn't agree with the title of work perk. As stated in my show, I think the perk of the job is printing out all your personal shit on the office computers or nicking a pen. And it was through these articles that I started imagining characters and kind of starting to piece together a bit of a story, and then that's where the Egg Rumour was born. The Egg Rumour is currently a 45-minute musical comedy exploring the new female work perk, egg freezing. Ladies, you can now freeze your eggs, work your way up the ladder, find the right man, forget about having kids for a few years. It really is that simple, or is it?
So you're queer, but have no fear, a gay who likes it up the bum. She, a les who has some eggs, a jar into which you'll come. Oh, your parents are perplexed. Ah, the labor will be slow. Sleep you're never going to get. You're a parent who is co. So you're queer, you're really queer. Gay. Who likes it up the bum. She, a les who has some eggs, into which you'll come. Your parents are perplexed. The labor will be slow. You're never gonna get. You're a parent who is co. See, it's very simple.
So there you have it. And I hope that made you laugh out loud, as it did me when I was listening on the train. That was another clip from the brilliant Jamie Anderson. I do hoping I can share the whole song because it is brilliant. So I'm going to leave it there. That is your Fertility Fest showcase. I know there was so much. I wanted to share as many bits as I could with you, and we are going to be making a number of the sessions available, as many as we can. So make sure you subscribe to the Fertility Podcast, which you can do via your favourite podcast app, wherever you're listening, or just go to thefertilitypodcast.com and you can do it there. Also, keep checking out fertilityfest.com for details of more of the content that will be shared, and all the details of who you've heard in this episode will be on the show notes for this episode. All right, so you need to get yourself to thefertilitypodcast.com/fertilityfest19. all right, go have a look. I'll put all sorts of links back to other podcast episodes that I might have mentioned, as well as where I can to links to the sessions on the Fertility Fest website, so hopefully it'll give you a really complete picture. And I will be back next week, hopefully with a full voice. You can keep up to date with me on my socials at FertilityPoddy. Thank you for sticking with me through this slightly bumpy ride. Until the next time.